Adele is a teenage girl who feels very alone. She loves country music and spends a lot of time by herself because she's very shy and insecure. This makes her feel like she's a burden on her family, which includes her pregnant mother and her mother's boyfriend. One day when Adele gets home, her mother tells her they received a letter from a lawyer about her Aunt Dora, who is quite wealthy but slightly eccentric. Aunt Dora needs someone to take care of her. Her mother insists that since they're the only family Aunt Dora has, Adele should go and help. Her mother even jokes about naming her unborn baby Dory after Aunt Dora if Adele can manage to inherit her wealth. Later that night, Adele's privacy is invaded by her mother's boyfriend, who tries to peek at her through her bathroom door. This makes Adele uncomfortable, and she quickly shuts the door, feeling scared and violated. The next morning, Adele is so desperate to leave this hell that she writes about wanting to escape her situation in her journal. Finding this as the perfect opportunity, she heads to Aunt Dora's huge and quiet house. On her way there, she hears someone whisper her name. But when she looks around, no one is there. She keeps moving. When Adele arrives at Aunt Dora's, she finds a key in a tiny hole by the front door and lets herself in. The house is silent, like a graveyard, and it feels like no one is there. She goes to the kitchen and sees a grocery list and a bunch of dirty dishes in the sink. It looks like Aunt Dora made the list before she even arrived. Adele then rolls up her sleeves and starts cleaning up, but she hears a bell ringing from upstairs. She follows the sound and keeps calling for Aunt Dora but gets no response. As she approaches a room upstairs, the light outside the door turns on by itself. Adele knocks on the door, and a note slides under the door instead of Aunt Dora answering. The note has strict instructions. Absolutely no house guests. Keep the front door closed, and please keep it quiet. This makes Adele feel even more isolated and uneasy about what lies ahead in this mysterious big house. After settling into her room at Aunt Dora's mansion, Adele encounters a creepy-looking doll perched on her bed. Next to it lies an old photograph of a young Aunt Dora smiling beside a friend. Both the women in the photograph look beautiful. Adele thought that might be Aunt Dora's best friend. Adele sets the picture aside and hears a creak outside her room. Peeking under the door, she glimpses Aunt Dora's feet moving away, a silent, ghostly presence. The next morning, Adele scrubs the bathtub clean and notices a hairpin on the floor. She picks it up, imagining it must have belonged to her aunt. With hopes of making a connection, she prepares a simple breakfast of sardines and crackers for Aunt Dora. She tries to engage in conversation as she serves the meal, but the response is just cold silence. Feeling isolated, Adele heads to the grocery store, where she's struck by the sight of a woman her age. Intrigued, she even buys the same fruit, pomegranate, that the woman was looking at. Back home, she stabs the pomegranate and tastes a seed, only to find it disappointingly sour. Later, Adele confides to her mom over the phone that she hasn't seen Aunt Dora since arriving. Her mother, stressed by her own needs, instructs Adele to ask Aunt Dora for payment in advance to cover expensive baby vitamins. When Aunt Dora calls out from behind her door, Adele offers help but receives only silence in return. Another note slides under the door. Aunt Dora requests a prescription refill and fresh flowers every Sunday. Feeling unmoored, Adele cleans the house and later tries to spy on her aunt by sliding a mirror under the door but sees nothing. Needing a break, she takes a walk and stops at a clothing store, captivated by a pretty top. She then visits a bar but leaves quickly when a man's stare startled her. She again hears her name whispered again. Scared, Adele hurries away and keeps walking down the street. Her escape leads her to a diner, where she runs into the woman from the grocery store. When Adele runs out of money at the register, this girl covers Adele's bill. They strike up a conversation, and Adele learns her name is Beth, who jokes about the street Adele lives on, sparking a shared laugh. For the first time in a while, Adele feels a flicker of connection, a brief respite from the shadows of her aunt's mysterious mansion. That night, Adele gets home quite late. She heads toward her room. As she tiptoes past Aunt Dora's room, a voice cuts through the silence. "You're late," Aunt Dora remarks, her tone carrying a hint of disapproval. Adele apologizes to her aunt and walks toward her room. The next morning, Adele steps outside to feed the cat she first met on the porch, using some canned sardines. Just then, Beth appears, jogging by the house. Panting and wiping her forehead, she mentions she's dying of thirst. Adele invites her in and hands her a glass of water. Curious, Beth heads toward the stairs, but Adele stops her, explaining that her aunt dislikes having visitors. Undeterred, Beth ventures into the basement, turning on an old music player. They dig into Aunt Dora's old wardrobe, trying on vintage clothes. Beth even styles a scarf around Adele's head, adding a touch of flair to her look. Adele tells Beth about Aunt Dora's agoraphobia, explaining why she never leaves her room or the house. Suddenly, they hear Aunt Dora's bell ring. Adele prepares a meal and heads upstairs, with Beth eagerly wanting to sneak a peek at the reclusive aunt. They leave the meal on the floor, and as they spy from the stairs, only Aunt Dora's hands appear to retrieve it. No one could see her face. Later, Adele and Beth find themselves splashing around in a pool, escaping the mansion's heavy atmosphere. Changing afterwards, Adele admires Beth's style, noticing how she's starting to pick up some of Beth's mannerisms. That day, Adele spots the blouse she admired before in a store. Tempted, she tries it on, but decides against buying it when she sees the price tag. She has a plan. While grocery shopping, she opts for a cheaper brand of sardines and crackers for Aunt Dora, keeping the saved money in a small paper bag. That way, she can save more to buy that top. In the evening at the bar, Beth talks about spending her weekend at a friend's cottage by the lake and doing grave rubbings. She invites Adele, who hesitates, worried about leaving Aunt Dora alone. But Beth persuades her it'll just be for a day, so Adele agrees. They stop at the pharmacy to pick up Aunt Dora's heart medication. Beth guides Adele to the cheaper drugs section, claiming that the pharmacy only cares about making quick money. They return home, joking about a creepy ceramic doll in Adele's room. Suddenly, Beth accidentally drops and breaks the doll. They freeze, hearing a noise from Aunt Dora's room. Concerned, Adele calls out to check on her aunt, but receives no response, deepening the mystery and their unease. The next day, Adele apologizes to Aunt Dora for bringing Beth over and asks about getting paid in advance, but her aunt insists on sticking to their original payment schedule. After the conversation, Adele secretly replaces Aunt Dora's expensive heart medication with a cheaper alternative and pockets some money saved from earlier. She even gave her food, which she got at a lower price. While returning from Aunt Dora's room, Adele finds a secret room. Her curiosity leads her into this unseen room, where she discovers Aunt Dora's old jewelry and makeup area. Trying on a necklace, she's unexpectedly locked in the room, panicking and feeling trapped. She calls out, suspecting Aunt Dora's involvement, but the door soon unlocks, revealing the same hairpin she found earlier on her bathroom floor. Later, Beth picks up Adele for the trip to the lake, where Beth shares a personal and painful story of a past abortion. This deepens their bond, though Adele momentarily daydreams about being closer to Beth. They later visit a graveyard for grave rubbings, continuing their adventurous day. That night, Adele notices a strange sculpture in Beth's room, where they share a bed. The following morning, with a moth startling her awake, Adele tries to call Aunt Dora but receives no answer. Sensing something wrong, she rushes back home without telling Beth. As she reaches home, she picks up some flowers from the front gate. While she was picking up the flower, she sensed an old lady sitting behind her on a rocking chair. She turned back and saw no one. She enters the house and goes straight to Aunt Dora's room to inform her that she is back and keeps the flowers outside the door. She then quickly fixes her aunt's breakfast. Later in the day, when she checked on her aunt, she discovered that her aunt had not touched the food as it was still outside her door. Sensing something is wrong, she opens the door with the spare key, only to discover Aunt Dora's lifeless body, which is likely from the medication switch. She has been dead for hours. In a moment of shock and regret, Adele hastily takes a ring from Aunt Dora's finger before calling the police. Attempting to reconnect with Beth, Adele leaves a ring and a note at Beth's door, but leaves heartbroken after seeing another man in Beth's apartment. Beth later reads the note and tries on the ring, contemplating Adele's hasty departure. Back at the mansion, Adele, overwhelmed by her actions and the eerie silence, steals more jewelry. She sells the items at a jewelry store, but upon returning home, she's haunted by the sound of a rocking chair that vanishes as she approaches, leaving her in a state of unease and solitude. After her aunt's demise, Adele decides to stay back in this house. The next day, Adele gets dressed up nicely at home, wearing the blouse she had long admired and finally purchased with the money she took from Aunt Dora. After doing her makeup, she heads to the bar, hoping to distract herself from thoughts of Beth by meeting someone new. As she talks to a man at the bar, her attention is suddenly drawn to a figure she believes is Beth standing behind him. She asks the man if he can see her too, but when he looks, he sees no one. Returning home, Adele finds the hairpin from before on her bed. Later, while relaxing in a bath, the house's atmosphere shifts eerily. Doors slam shut and the lights flicker off. Wrapped in a robe, she investigates the disturbance downstairs and is startled to find Beth, soaking wet and eerily still, in the kitchen. The same fruit from their earlier encounter is on the table. Beth claims she came to thank Adele for the ring, but behaves oddly, almost unnaturally. As Adele hears noises from upstairs, she goes to check, but the lights cut out again, accompanied by the haunting sound of Aunt Dora's bell. When she returns, Beth is devouring the rotten fruit on the table with unsettling ferocity. Venturing into Aunt Dora's bedroom, Adele witnesses the rocking chair moving by itself. Frightened, she rushes downstairs, assuming Beth has left when she finds the door open. However, turning around, she's horrified to see someone in the rocking chair. It's not Beth, but Aunt Dora herself. Panicked, Adele flees to the basement, where she hears whispers calling her name. Beth, now transformed into a monstrous figure, descends the stairs. Trapped, Adele hides under a bed. She accepts her grim fate as the creature approaches. Years later, a young girl named Dory enters the house, calling for Adele. She goes upstairs and knocks on the door of Adele's room. Now an old woman, Adele looks much older than her years, bearing a haunting resemblance to Aunt Dora. Dory finds the same photograph that Adele once discovered after coming to Aunt Dora's house, but with a chilling addition. Beth is in the picture, suggesting her ghostly presence in the house. The house's history of hauntings hints at a deep connection between Beth and Aunt Dora, possibly as best friends or lovers. It could be Beth's ghost that has influenced Adele to lead to Aunt Dora's death, perhaps to reunite with her in the afterlife. However, Aunt Dora's spirit, enraged by her niece's actions, curses Adele to suffer a similar fate of isolation and madness, perpetuating the cycle of torment in the haunted house.